Hey everybody, it is Dean Z speaking to you from room 138 in Hutchins Hall. Today I want to talk about the fall travel season, which is what we call it in admissions. The admissions officers from all the different law schools will begin touring the country and touring the internet to interact with prospective applicants. So a lot of that, when it's in person, IRL, as you young kids like to say, we're standing behind a table and just talking to a whole bunch of people who come our way. We also do the analogous thing in various digital forums and other formats like that. The advice is pretty similar in both contexts, but a word on that too, if it's a digital event and you're interacting with people over Zoom or some other kind of video device, you want to make sure that your camera is on if at all possible. Getting questions from someone who doesn't have their camera on is very disconcerting for the person answering. And so I think it just detracts from the amount of information you'll get. So if possible, keep your camera on. So let's begin. How to make this successful. So first of all, I would just bear in mind at all times, what should your goal be here? I think it's twofold. One is to gather, factual information that you may have questions about, and another is to just see if you can form a sense of what this law school is like based on the person who they have sent to represent it. Yes. None of this is going to be perfect, but let's talk about the ways you can maximize your chances of achieving those two goals. Number one, how do you go in and feel confident and ready to have a good conversation? You don't have to worry about wearing, formal or professional or business casual attire. You're going to be a student. You're looking at being a student. It is absolutely fine to go in dressed like a student. If it makes you feel better to, wear more professional attire, that's fine too. The people who are working behind the tables will, for the most part, be dressed in some kind of professional attire. You don't have to be. Pretty safe doing what you want. You can have, and also you don't have to worry about, looking like a lawyer in any possible way. So if you have hair that is dyed a bright color, or you're wearing a nose ring, or you have tattoos, or whatever it is, that's great. You are totally fine presenting that way. Don't feel like you have to not be your authentic self in the way you are presenting to these people behind a table. Just be comfortable, and that will put you in a good spot for having good conversations, which is everybody's goal here. So what questions should you be asking in order to have these good conversations? Sometimes people will say, don't ask them things that you can discover for yourself on their website. And that's not a bad proxy to have in mind, but it's a little too narrow or a little too strict, because websites have a lot of information, and your point in coming to this event is to get some efficient information gathering, not swimming through someone's website, right? So I would say don't ask questions that are answerable from the website in one word. So don't ask something like, what is your school's median LSAT? Because then the answer is just some number, and it's hard to know where to go from there. It doesn't really set you up for having a back and forth, and that is your goal. And it's not going to really reveal much about the school, what their answer is. So think about it's a little bit like writing your personal statement. It just involves some thinking ahead of time. What is it that is important to you? What are your goals for choosing a law school? What are your goals for, being a lawyer? And then thinking of one or two questions at least that will help shed some light on those matters, and that will enable you to let the admissions rep speak for more than 10 seconds. So, one example. Let's say you're thinking, I want to get a dual JD MBA. Rather than saying does your school offer a dual JD MBA, to which the answer is either yes or no, you want to say I am interested in getting a dual JD MBA because I want to do blah, blah, blah with my degree. Do you have that program? And if so, is there anything you can tell me about the admissions process? And maybe even, do you think, given my goals, that it's useful to get a JD MBA? And that sets the person up to talk about all kinds of things that you can both get, like factual, helpful guidance about the best way to approach this application process, but it will also probably tell you a little bit about how does this school feel about your particular career goals? How does this school, what can they do to address those career goals? Maybe they have a JD MBA, maybe they have other things that are also in that realm, but are different that you wouldn't have thought to ask about, right? So ask something that is as open-ended as possible and see how that person responds. I said, like, come prepared with 2 questions or so. You could have more, but then there's the question of how long should you be standing at a table. That's going to be very context dependent. There are some schools where not a ton of people are going to be there. And if you're talking to one of those schools, it's, I think, absolutely appropriate to ask lots of questions if there aren't people in line behind you. And you can judge, have some situational awareness, get a sense of whether this person is trying to end the conversation because maybe they need a coffee break or something like that. But otherwise you're pretty safe talking for 15 minutes or something like that. That seems absolutely appropriate. If, on the other hand, it is the kind of school where you have you've been waiting in line, and there will be schools where you have to just make up your mind you're going to have to wait in line, just look at your phone or whatever. But if there's tons of people behind you when you finally get to the table, be respectful of them. Ask the 1 or 2 questions and then say, if you are enjoying the conversation, say, like, is it all right if I just step aside and listen to other people's questions? I don't want to take all your time. And then you can both hear what other people ask and continue to assess the way this person is answering those questions. And you might end up hearing questions that you wouldn't have thought to ask that are actually very useful, and then you can steal them for your next conversation. This leads to the question of, like, what schools should you be talking to? Do you need to talk to all of them? Definitely not. Think about what schools are you interested in, like what are your core schools, and then maybe expand that a little bit. So let's say you are sure your biggest goal about law school is, like, I only want to attend law school in the state of Illinois. Well, you should certainly talk to the law schools in the state of Illinois. But maybe Wisconsin would be okay too, or Indiana or Michigan, right? So maybe expand it a little more than just Illinois. Or say, I want to attend schools with this ranking. Maybe add a couple on either side outside of that limited ranking idea, because you don't know what you don't know. So don't be too rigid in making the list, but also don't worry about hurting someone's feelings by walking past them. I'm going to be honest with you. I do sometimes notice, like, oh, I see that person talking to, some peer school that I have a lot of overlap with. They just walked past me. And then I cry a little bit or weep inside. But you know what? That's not your problem. I get over it. Don't worry about it. It's totally fine, totally appropriate. You've got to maximize this event for your purposes. Although, to that end, I will say one thing to avoid that seems to happen at almost every fair I've ever attended is the fair goes till 2 o'clock, and I start picking up at 2 o'clock, and at 2:01 someone comes up and says, like, oh, I'm sorry, I just have a few questions. That's at that point in the day I've been standing for 4 hours, and I am an old broad with, like, messed up knees. So I'm really, like, desperate to sit down at this point, and so that's not great to have a conversation under those circumstances. You're not going to get the best of me, and it's also, it's a little disrespectful. It's like, well, I doubt you just walked into the room and made a beeline for Michigan. You probably talked to 20 schools before this, and Michigan was the last on your list. So, not great. That's, like, maybe the only thing I would say you really want to avoid. Another thing, though, about just sort of being courteous at these events is how to address the people you're talking to. They'll usually have name tags. If there is a title on that name tag, sometimes schools send professors. Often they're sending assistant deans. If there's a title on there, try to use that title. If it's not clear to you what the title is, or you just feel awkward, you don't have to use a name at all. What is disconcerting, is someone just addressing you by your first name who you don't know, especially when you're old like I am. It just feels funny. So, often people will invite you to call them by their first name, but it's nice to wait to be invited. Law schools tend to be kind of formal places, legal professions sort of formal, so it's nice to sort of not start out informal. Just the default should be being a little bit formal. Here's something that sometimes happens. This is not like a mistake, but it's just, you don't need to do it. You don't need to bring a resume to hand out. The admissions reps never have any place to put those. Like, it almost inevitably gets lost. Same with business cards. You don't need to give them anything. When I was new in this job, I used to be like, oh, I don't have anything, and I'd hand it back, and the person would look hurt. Now I just take them because I realize there's no need to hand it back. But I don't really have anything to do with it, so you don't need to be prepared. Save the trees. Don't worry about that. Finally, I think the only thing I want to address are fee waivers. There are schools that routinely give out fee waivers to people who come to these events. Not all schools do that, though. I assume Michigan is not one of the schools that gives out fee waivers at an event. Everything we do fee waiver-wise is digital, so I have no way of doing it at an event. I assume the schools that do give out fee waivers make that obvious in some way, but I could be wrong about that. So if you want to ask about fee waivers, I just do it in a way that doesn't put the person on the spot and say, like, I'm interested in fee waivers. Is there a way to talk to your school about getting a fee waiver? Something like that, something general, so they can say, yes, here's your fee waiver, or you know what, can you email us, or no, we don't give fee waivers. Just do it in a way that it doesn't make the person feel like they are, being rude by saying no. That's maybe like the one kind of question I get that I always feel awkward about at a law school fair, because I feel like I am letting the person down, and I hate doing that. Okay, and now just to wind up on this topic, I want to say, if you're in a place where there aren't events like this, or it's very hard for you to get to them because you have a job or what have you, don't sweat it. These are not do or die in any way for your application success. It's a great way, like I said, to efficiently gather information and to form a subjective impression of schools beyond what their standard materials would give you. But it is absolutely not like a box that you have to check in order to get into law school. So, if you can't go to one of these events and you want to interact with a school, call them, email them, see if you can set up a time to have an individual conversation. Most schools are able to do that too. But this is not something that if you don't do it, you are harming your chances of getting admitted. It's all gravy for you. It isn't a necessary thing. So with that mindset, go forth and have a great time at any of these events that you actually attend. Okay, I think that's all I have to say about that. Now I want to talk about a question we got on our YouTube channel. I love it because it is the same kind of, crazed attention to detail that I really thrive on. The person asked, is there a preference for an essay being left justified or both left and right justified? And I like the way it was framed. Is there a preference? Because I have a preference. I don't know about the whole rest of the world, but I have a strong preference, and I am delighted to have the opportunity to share it. My preference is just left justified. That's my preference both for reading as well as for when I am writing something. And it's because when you're left and right justified, it is very hard, it messes up the space a little bit, and it makes it hard to see if you've made any errors in spacing in your writing. Not that that's a big deal if you have 2 spaces between a word instead of 1, but, while you're being detail-oriented, you might as well make it easy on yourself. So I would go with just left justified. Thanks for asking. Now, let's turn to language. Dustin, who you all know, recently told me about something on TikTok that was like, what about your job has ruined your regular life? And I love this question because I feel like my obsession with grammar is definitely related to being a lawyer, and it sort of ruins my life in small ways. Specifically, the other day, my son sent me, a screenshot of something to ask me a question or wanted to have a conversation about it, and it had the word judgment in it, and judgment was spelled wrong, which I immediately pointed out, and my son said, "You are intolerable." So that was hurtful. But still, it was spelled wrong. So what am I supposed to do? You know, it was wrong. So the way it was spelled wrong is that it had two E's, so Judgement. Now, who cares? Apparently in England, they spell it that way. So my son made a strong case that, or not a strong case, but he made an avid case that it was spelled correctly. But we're in America, and so you should take that second E out of there. It should just be Judgement. And there are a lot of things like that, Britishisms, where they include letters that we don't include. And you could say, well, it's not wrong because that's how they do it in England. But I would be on a lookout for that. Look for words that seem to be spelled mostly one way, but every once in a while you see it spelled another way. It's probably because of the British spelling. And, I think better practice is to just spell it, in the way that we in America have decided to spell it. So hopefully that is of some utility. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please, if you have any comments, questions, whatever, put it in the comment section below or email us at law.jd.admissions@umich.edu and put vlog in the subject line. Thanks, as always, to the incredibly tolerant, patient, and insightful Dustin Johnston. And wherever you go, go blue.